Hey guys! Tonight, we step into a quiet courtyard just before sunrise. The air is crisp, the sky still clinging to the last hints of blue-gray darkness, and the stones beneath your feet are cool with dew. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime taps gently in the morning air. You stand in the inner garden of a samurai's home in Edo-period Japan, and inside, he is just beginning to stir. You might think a samurai leaps out of bed with a sword in hand and a battle cry in his throat. In reality, it's more like a very dignified version of hitting snooze. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle across the polished tatami floor, following your host. He doesn't speak. No one does, not yet. Morning is a silent ritual. First, he kneels beside a small basin of cold water. He washes his face. Quick, efficient, not a single splash wasted. Then a simple linen towel. Then silence again. His servant quietly folds away the futon, smoothing the bedding like it never existed. Your feet are bare on the wooden floor. You feel each plank, slightly warm from the night air. The samurai dresses slowly, layer by layer, undergarments, kimono, then the hakama, those wide pleated trousers. He ties them tightly, his motions practiced, nearly meditative. There's no armor this morning, no armor needed for what lies ahead. Breakfast. The room smells of hinoki wood and a faint trace of incense, still lingering from last night's prayers. Someone in the house has already started a small fire in the kitchen. You hear it, the soft pop of embers, the clatter of ceramic bowls, the whistle of rice water threatening to boil over. Historians still argue whether samurai lived more like bureaucrats or warriors during the Edo period. But this morning, your host seems more monk than soldier. Breakfast isn't served in a grand hall. There's no bacon buffet. It's in a small, quiet room off the garden, where the morning light spills across the floor like honey. You kneel at the low table, the room still cool before the heat of day. Now, here's your first surprise. Breakfast for a samurai looks suspiciously like breakfast for everyone else, at least on the surface. One bowl of white rice, a small dish of pickled vegetables, a slice of grilled fish, probably mackerel, and miso soup. A square of tamagoyaki, that slightly sweet rolled omelet might appear if you're lucky or ranked high enough. The difference is in the meaning. Your host bows his head in thanks, not just to the cook, but to the rice itself. In a society built on rice not just as food, but as currency, that little bowl is a quiet symbol of survival, status, and restraint. And if you're picturing our samurai pulling out his katana to slice his grilled fish, let's just say you probably wouldn't last a week in his household. That's not a breakfast sword, that's a dinner conversation ender. No one rushes. There is no coffee gulped between bites, no phones, no calendar alerts screaming from the corner. Just slow, mindful eating. Each bite has purpose. Even the pickles, tsukemono, are chosen with care. A bit sour, a bit sharp, meant to wake you up without shouting. A samurai's servant quietly refills the miso soup. It smells faintly of fermented bean paste and the sea. It's not the creamy miso you've tried at your local sushi place. This is thinner, more rustic, with shreds of wakame seaweed and slivers of tofu just barely floating. And here's a quirky bit for you. Samurai sometimes ate miso aged for months even years, believing the deeper flavor mirrored deeper wisdom, or at least a stronger gut. We still debate whether their digestive systems thank them or curse them later. The walls of the room slide open to reveal the garden again. Morning birdsong filters in. There's a rhythmic raking of gravel nearby, someone tending the paths. The entire household hums like a well-oiled, quiet, respectful machine. Your host doesn't speak during the meal, not because he's moody. It's etiquette. Morning meals were often eaten in silence, a kind of living meditation, maybe even a quiet way of sharpening the spirit for the day ahead. That, or he's still not a morning person after 30 years of sunrise rice. Now, just as you finish your bowl, something odd catches your eye. A single plum, pickled, wrinkled, sour as heartbreak. Umeboshi. It sits alone on a tiny plate, and it's not decoration. This is a flavor jolt, meant to balance the rice, aid digestion, and possibly wake the dead. One bite, and your entire bloodstream registers confusion. It's tart, salty, almost medicinal, but oddly satisfying, kind of like history itself. And just like that, the meal ends. Your host wipes his mouth with a small cloth. He sets his chopsticks down with gentle precision. He bows again, not because he's done eating, but because the act of eating was its own ceremony. You follow him out, your knees a little sore from kneeling. Outside, the sun has fully risen. The light is golden now, catching on the edge of his sword, which waits quietly by the door, not drawn, just present. Like so many things in his world. Now just as you finish your bowl, something odd catches your eye. A single plum, pickled, wrinkled, sour as heartbreak. Umeboshi. It sits alone on a tiny plate, and it's not decoration. This is a flavor jolt, meant to balance the rice, aid digestion, and possibly wake the dead. One bite, and your entire bloodstream registers confusion. It's tart, salty, almost medicinal, but oddly satisfying, kind of like history itself. And just like that, the meal ends. Your host wipes his mouth with a small cloth. He sets his chopsticks down with gentle precision. He bows again, not because he's done eating, but because the act of eating was its own ceremony. You follow him out, your knees a little sore from kneeling. Outside, the sun has fully risen. The light is golden now, catching on the edge of his sword, which waits quietly by the door, not drawn, just present. Like so many things in his world, you step back inside with him into a quiet that seems somehow fuller than before. Breakfast may be finished, but its taste still lingers, not just on the tongue, but in the body. The warmth of the miso, the texture of rice, the sting of the umeboshi, it all stays with you like a soft drumbeat. In this next hour of the samurai's morning, nothing moves quickly. That's the thing people often misunderstand about warriors like him. It's not all action and adrenaline. A samurai's day was often built around rituals and routines, and breakfast was more than a meal. It was a mirror of his values. So what exactly did he eat? Let's break it down gently, like a sleeping cat stretching across a sunlit floor. The rice, short grain, sticky, slightly sweet, not seasoned, not buttered, just rice, steamed to tender perfection, each grain holding its own. It was both filler and foundation. This wasn't the side dish, it was the star. Rice was taxed, stored, counted. In feudal Japan, land value was literally measured by how much rice it could produce. Koku, a unit meaning enough rice to feed one man for a year. Your breakfast bowl was more than food, it was political math. Next, the pickles. Tsukemono. These weren't mere garnish. They were color, crunch, and contrast. Maybe daikon radish, sliced thin, cured in rice bran, or a cucumber, pickled with salt and kombu. Bright, cold, and ever so slightly aggressive, they served as the shop notes in an otherwise soft song. And yes, scholars still debate whether their function was more for digestion or for symbolic balance. One theory claims that the colors of tsukemono matched the 5 traditional elements: earth, fire, water, wind, and void. Or maybe they were just really into snacking with cosmic vibes. And then, miso soup, the liquid heart of the meal. Made from fermented soybean paste, miso wasn't just nourishment. It was culture in a bowl, earthy, salty. Some mornings it was cloudy with tofu and wakame. Other days it shimmered with mushrooms or root vegetables. The ingredients changed with the seasons, which meant your soup was never just about flavor. It was also about awareness, knowing what month it was, what was blooming, what was fading. It was food that taught you to pay attention. Sometimes, depending on region and rank, your samurai might also have a grilled fish, usually salted, not sauced. Fish like aji or saba, mackerel and horse mackerel, simple, silver-skinned creatures that sizzled over charcoal fires. And here's a fringe detail for you. In higher-ranking households, fish would sometimes be served with a dab of freshly grated daikon and a curl of dried katsuobushi, shaved bonito flakes that danced from the heat like ghostly ribbons. Did they know the flakes would move like that? Probably. Did they find it a little magical? Definitely. And then there was tamagoyaki, the Japanese rolled omelet, sweet and delicate, made in a rectangular pan and folded layer by layer with chopsticks and care. It wasn't always part of the spread, but when it appeared, it was a little sign of luxury. Eggs weren't cheap. They weren't industrial. You had to have chickens or connections, or both. So this little square of fluffy yellow might mean your host had status, or a very sneaky chicken coop. Still, the best detail might be what wasn't on the table. No meat, at least not regularly. Samurai followed strict sumptuary laws about diet, especially during certain periods. Buddhism had long influenced Japanese culinary practices, encouraging plant-based meals. So, although samurai were warriors, they often ate like monks. It wasn't about abstaining from indulgence. It was about aligning the body with purpose. A clear gut for a clear mind. And yes, tea. But not the fancy tea ceremony you're picturing with the elaborate bowls and the slow circular stirring. Morning tea for a samurai was usually roasted hojicha, or simple sencha, steeped, not whisked, served plain to wash it all down. Think of it as the graceful Japanese equivalent of a black coffee, calming, grounding, but without the existential jitters. By the time breakfast ends, the meal has done more than fill your stomach. It's put you in a state of readiness, not for war, but for being present. Every item was chosen, every flavor balanced, even the sounds, like the clink of porcelain or the faint sizzle from the fire, played their part in the atmosphere. And here's a strange little footnote from the fringe. Some samurai were known to compose short haiku before or after breakfast, not as poets necessarily, but as a form of inner alignment. 1 verse, 3 lines to anchor the mind. Something like, steam from the miso, shadows of the pine still stretch, a sword rests in light. Okay, maybe that's mine, but it fits. And all of this, the food, the silence, the posture, sets the tone for a day that might involve meetings, patrols, practice, or, on rare occasion, actual combat. But the grounding, that comes from this table, from rice that was grown by farmers, from fish caught at dawn, from soup stirred in the same pot as yesterday and likely tomorrow. Historians still argue whether the simplicity of this breakfast was a spiritual choice or an economic one. Was it devotion or was it practicality dressed up in ceremony? The answer, as always, is probably both. You walk with the samurai through the house now, full from so little, grounded by so much. There's no sign of clutter, no sound but soft sandals against polished wood. The home smells faintly of charcoal and citrus. Somewhere in another room, someone is oiling a blade. Somewhere else, a scroll is being rolled open for study. And as the door slides open to let in more light, you realize the morning hasn't just begun. It has arrived. The tray is gone. The rice has settled. Outside, the wind rustles through the bamboo just enough to remind you that the world is very much awake, even if your bones are still thinking about the warmth of miso. You stretch a little, slowly, because sudden movements after breakfast are for bandits and fools. Your sandals rest near the threshold, lined neatly. You place your feet into them with that practiced, almost sacred care that only comes from doing the same thing for decades. And then you pause, not because you forgot something, but because you remember something that never showed up on the tray. Where was the meat? Sure, we've talked about fish, but you haven't seen pork, beef, or even chicken. Not at breakfast, and probably not at lunch either. This is where the story gets curiously cultural. In many periods of Japanese history, especially under Buddhist influence, meat consumption was heavily restricted. Not outright banned, but discouraged. Not just for monks, but for everyone. The idea was that the killing of animals led to spiritual impurity, and samurai, despite their warlike profession, were expected to maintain an inner harmony, a kind of warrior zen. Of course, rules bend when hunger strikes. There are records of samurai hunting wild boar or deer in the mountains. Some even enjoyed yakiniku-style grilled meats in private, away from the public eye. But during peacetime, especially in a rigidly structured household, meat was unlikely to appear at breakfast. Which brings us to the quiet truth. The samurai didn't eat to indulge. He ate to continue. His meals were fuel, ritual, a moment to connect with the world, not dominate it. And though samurai were famously stoic, the relationship with food was surprisingly tender. Every bite was a quiet thank you to farmers, fishers, wives, ancestors, the season, and yes, even to the rice itself. Historians still argue whether the strict simplicity of the samurai diet was imposed from above or internalized over time. Did they genuinely believe in the virtue of restraint, or were they just following rules because they had no choice? You can almost hear one muttering into his pickled plum, "Discipline tastes better when it's salted." And there's one more subtle absence: sweets. Sugar didn't play a major role in Japanese cuisine until much later. When it did arrive, via Portuguese traders, it was a luxury, a novelty, something you tasted and then thought about for the rest of the week. So that little cube of tamagoyaki, that was your sugar rush. Back to the house, though. You're moving slowly now. The sword on your hip reminds you that this day may be long, and your role is more than just symbolic. You're not a breakfast blogger. You're part of a system, one that thrives on hierarchy, etiquette, and yes, a steady flow of steamed rice. In the garden, a small stone lantern glows faintly in the sun. Your wife kneels by the herbs, plucking a sprig of shiso. It will show up in dinner later, or maybe in a tea. Nothing is wasted here, not food, not effort, not time. There's a kind of comfort in that, isn't there? To live in a world where even breakfast means something, where what you eat reflects who you are and who you aim to become. And here's your final quirky tidbit. Some samurai were obsessed with seasonal balance, even in their meals. Spring was for bitter greens. Summer brought cooling cucumbers. Autumn introduced earthy roots. Winter leaned on pickled preserves. There was a kind of culinary calendar etched into every bowl. You can almost feel the rhythm of it. The food doesn't shout, it hums. Even the silence here feels intentional. You think of your own mornings now, rushing, reheating coffee, skipping meals. Somewhere between convenience and chaos, breakfast has become optional, disposable. But in the soft echo of this samurai's footsteps, you're reminded that the first meal of the day doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful. It can be quiet, humble, reverent, like a bow, like a prayer, like the start of something you might not fully understand, but still choose to respect. And now, as the last rays of breakfast light begin to fade, we settle into the gentle close. Let your breathing slow. The tatami is cool beneath your feet again. You return to the quiet room, the futon rolled up in its place. The air smells like cedar and old smoke. The last warmth of the hearth lingers like a memory, not hot, just present. Outside, the world continues. Bamboo rustles. Somewhere, a crow calls softly. But here, in this moment, nothing is asked of you, no decisions, no duties, just this stillness. Imagine the rice in your bowl, soft, white, steaming gently. Imagine the tiny click of chopsticks, the curl of rising miso, the tang of plum against your teeth. These things are small, simple, but they are enough. Your mind doesn't need to run now. You're not required to solve or protect or even finish the thought. Let the next image drift in like steam, without force, without agenda. Let it come. Maybe you're kneeling again at the low table. Maybe you're watching sunlight trace patterns on wood. Maybe you're simply breathing. You're safe here. You've done enough. There is peace in the rhythm of quiet lives. And tonight, you get to borrow that peace. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the samurai bow once more and fade softly into mist. Let the rice cool. Let the tea settle. Let the light dim. You're right where you need to be.